Today's guest is Dan Rupprecht, who is director and co-lead for the European practices for Idiscovery Solutions. And we'll be discussing how can data be an advantage to the CEO. I'm Tony Wood from CEO Collaborative Forum, and let's hear CEO reflect. Dan, a very warm welcome to you.
Hi, Tony, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Now, I was really excited about this one because data is most people who know me know that I love a bit of data. I love operations, and data is like the basis of AI. But you're a lawyer and you're into data. So how come you started moving into data? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's everybody has their unique perspective and unique entry point into the world of data, and that of a lawyer is no different. We deal with and operate with electronic systems all over the world, and inevitably the cases that we work on and the matters that we're instructed upon tend to have a data element associated with it. It's where our evidence is. It's where our facts are generated from. There are very specific types of cases that are really and truly driven through the digital world. And I sort of came to it, a little bit by accident. I mean, my background was that of an environmental lawyer. I studied and really focused in on the sort of environmental aspects of the legal system, but really was working at a time where much of that work was a bit dispersed across the United States, and found myself working at a law firm in Washington, D.C. That was international in its perspective, that had many different areas of the law that it focused in on, but primarily was dealing with large-scale corporate matters and dealing with investigations, whether it be internal sort of compliancy audit type investigations or regulatory in nature through the various authorities from around the world. And I really benefited from, working with a team of lawyers that were tasked inside the firm to not just understand the sort of legal side of the arguments being made, but really helping drive the technology that identified the facts associated with those types of cases. So very much at an early stage in my career, I was really presented with and asked to understand the various tools at our disposal and the technologies that could drive the matters that we were working on. And very quickly, I started to realize that these sorts of advantages really turned data into a strategic element to any of the matters that we worked on. You can tell from my accent, I'm not from around here. And much of this was driven out of the United States in the early stages of my career, where we were really focused in on large-scale government and regulatory requests out of Washington, D.C. We wanted to see how that played out in Europe, and moved over to work with a similar team out of the office in Brussels, Belgium. And again, started to go down the road of how does data help us on the cases that we're working on in the sort of corporate environment in Europe. So a lot of competition related matters, a lot of mergers and acquisitions and behavioral investigations. But again, with the same thread, that how is data being used on these particular matters?
So, so,
Yep.
so I was going to say, it's really interesting you say that, because we have a lot of CEOs and leaders listening and watching us, and they're thinking of this from the other side, which is you've got this great knowledge of data from an investigative point of view and understanding how it works in cases. How could a CEO use, or a leader use, this information or data strategically? Because now that you've got both sides of that view.
Yeah, I mean, very good question, because I think it is the bane of most large organizations or small
Yeah.
organizations. Again, as I mentioned, almost everything we do has a digital footprint at this stage. And there are certain responsibilities and obligations that are attached to that data. Oftentimes when I'm speaking with CEOs, when I'm advising on regulatory matters that are associated with corporate compliance and or
Mhm.
investigation, a lot of the discussion is built around information governance. How well do you know your data? And really, that's the core of anything that we do from a legal perspective. Is I always call it an exercise in avoiding I don't know answers. So
I like
yeah,
that.
when corporates are trying to get to grips with their digital environments, it's really boils down to that. Let's avoid these I don't know answers and really get a better understanding of what what proprietary information we hold, what information that is valuable within our organization, what information has certain requirements and obligations built around them, whether it be privileged information or personal information that needs to be touched upon. As well as how does that information flow through the organization and get disposed of on the other end. All of that is a very important and key element to any organization is really that data life cycle within the four corners of the building. And I think from my perspective, whenever I'm dealing with corporate CEOs and they ask me what can I do better in terms of dealing with data,
Mm,
my answer is always information governance. How well do you
yeah.
know it? Everything else will take care of itself, but just know your data.
So how would they? What would they do? Because obviously you can't get into it unless you're a small company. You won't be getting into your data. You'll be relying on other people to do it for you. So what type of controls could the CEO put in place above and beyond obviously the compliance elements? What how would you ask them to think about it or to view it?
Well, I'm actually one of the very few people that have looked at the GDPR and now the UK GDPR as a huge benefit to the corporate environment. I mean, when it
Yeah.
came into effect a few years ago, it was seen as a thorn in the side of almost every organization. Everyone was
Oh
looking
yeah.
at it as almost a Y2K moment. The sky was falling. We need to prepare. But I really saw it as a true advantage to the corporation because for
Yeah.
the first time, budgets were being applied to a problem that was growing out of control. Again, it goes back to information governance, but it really forced organizations to build teams around data,
Mm,
and not just, hey, what's the next best toy that we can use. uh, More around, well, how do we control it, how do we identify liability, and how do we utilize it if we need it to take advantage of some of the information that we hold. And GDPR allowed us to do that. Most organizations of a certain size developed a team to sort of put this into effect. Data protection officers were hired with budgets to
yeah.
really create a roadmap for data within the organization. And then that allowed all the other aspects of it, whether it be legal, whether it be IT, whether it be any of the various departments within an organization, to then create their box and their own departmental environment that deals with the data. But at its core, it really was an opportunity to organize it, and it really started with that whole data protection sort of arm at the very top.
Yeah, it's great. It gave it like a common understanding that
Yeah.
everybody, you interpreted it in different ways, but you could understand what it was. So, what are there's one aspect that we know that compliance can be a good thing. Are there any hurdles that you've seen when dealing with data that you would kind of especially call out?
Yeah, I mean the sheer volume of it.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah,
Stuff it
I,
all into GPT. That's what we
yeah,
should do.
yeah. I mean, I think that is the beginning and the end of the problem right there. There is so much of it,
Yeah,
and we just don't know what to do with it.
yeah,
And it's much easier for an organization just to forget about it because also it's very cheap to maintain it. You can have a database with just millions and millions of documents in there, and it costs you nothing just to hold it. But at the end of the day, you're also holding on to decades worth of a potential liability. And again, it goes back to, avoiding those I don't know answers. What's in there? I don't know. You have a problem. So really the root of issues that we find in sort of the digital world and in compliance and data investigation, it really is the volume. We're dealing with a haystack that is massive. So if we're looking for needles, it's going to be very difficult to find it in the volume that we're dealing.
That must be quite interesting. I mean, what sort of needles are you looking for that you're allowed to tell us? That it's okay. Nobody will tell. Everybody who's listening won't tell anything, so it's perfectly safe.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anything. I mean, it could be at a very rudimentary level. I mean,
Yeah.
we could go at the individual rights of certain employees who just request their information back.
Okay.
They have that right. They're called subject access requests. And it really is an exercise in giving back the information that pertains to that individual. Now, saying, okay, we're going to give you your data back is, easily said, but not so easily done when it's buried in terabytes, petabytes, or even volumes that can't even be spoken about in terms of sheer quantity without digging a rabbit hole that is endless. So really, that sort of information is always sought after, and we're always looking for novel solutions to get there faster and cheaper. We've also got compliancy issues. There are certain organizations, there are certain industries that are bound by requirements, not necessarily tracking, but certain obligations within the organization to be mindful of information that needs to be protected in some way. Banking rules,
Yeah.
secrecy rule, all of those issues need to be guardrailed. And making it and getting to that information and understanding where it is and then moving it to its proper environment again requires levels of technology and data interrogation to get to those comfort zones of being compliant within sort of regulated industries.
So that sounds quite tricky. You've got huge amounts of information. How are you using technology to guide you or to get into that? Have you been able to use any large language models or do you train models? I mean, what sort of tools do you use to help you find that needle in that haystack?
Yeah, I mean it's been an evolving industry for quite some time, but we're entering into an age where we're really provided with many different tools and technologies that allow us to be a bit more creative in our approach to digital investigation. One of the areas that I didn't mention on top of compliance is sort of the regulatory requests
Yeah.
that organizations are often presented with. And oftentimes you don't know what they're looking for. And in essence, you're being asked very difficult questions on subject matters that really have no answers at that stage. So it becomes an exercise in finding something, not getting everything. And we use technology to gain insights into the data that we hold. So a lot of what we do in the interrogation space, and what I do as an advisor on these types of matters, is use a combination of the technologies available coupled with sort of goal oriented, sort of investigative analysis, almost a sociological experiment. What would a person do in these types of situations?
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and really marrying that up. So we have anything from search term analysis, which is probably the most rudimentary technology that we're using, straight through to what we call technology assisted review, which comes in a few flavors, but continuous active learning, which is a machine learning environment that really takes an exponential approach in terms of taking a subject matter expert and allowing that individual to train systems to find what it is that we're looking for. And of course, there is AI elements that are coming to market over the last year. It'd be remiss not to mention that. But again, those are early days. I would say that they're not highly utilized at this stage, but everyone watch that space because it will be coming to us pretty quick.
Well, so you've got this multi-billion piece jigsaw puzzle that you have to put together and say, find the part of the puzzle that looks like this. I mean, that must be. It sounds like an obvious place to use something like AI. But there again, you're the people who need to make sure that the guardrails and the training is safe on AI. So that must be so frustrating knowing that you have this tool, but is it safe? Is it, are you going to like bleed out some information and accidentally move that into the model or into a model elsewhere? I mean, how do you even start to figure out what's safe?
Well, I think it takes us back 10 years when we first started dealing with predictive coding and continuous active learning. So these were technologies where we put a lot of trust in technology to do the work of the individual. Now, it wasn't true AI in the sense that, it wasn't coming up with anything novel. It was basically taking the subject matter expert and putting him or her on steroids. How do I make you one person into 100 people doing that one
Oh,
job?
yeah.
But it is a machine learning type of environment where the system is reliant upon the human. We're now moving into an age where the human can be taken out or become less of a driver in the instance. But if I go back 10 years when we first started utilizing machine learning, there was a lot of trial and error there.
Mm.
It depended on the type of data that you were after or that you were dealing with. It had elements of understanding in terms of what your end goals were, and did that technology assisted review have the right content to get you to that endpoint in a strategic way. And I would say in the early days of TAR, there was a lot of mistakes made, and we over the last 10 years have really started to hone in on where the advantages are. Where is this technology best placed? It became a situation where advisors like myself and consultants like myself no longer relied on a single avenue of interrogation. We were now dealing with multiple technologies and multiple tools that if we used them in one way on a certain type of matter with certain data that was available to us, we would get there faster and cheaper. With AI, we're at the early stages of that same trial and error scenario. Some things are going to work extremely well. Other things are going to fall flat. It all depends on your data and the source data that you're dealing with and how it's being utilized and what you're trying to achieve out of it. But make no mistake, I do believe that we're moving into an era where actually too much data is a benefit. We're currently sitting at a point where we look at too much data and say, oh, this is impossible. How do I get to the end of it? And with AI, the conversation changes a little bit. More data means more insights, more understanding. It gets us to the evidence that we need quicker and cheaper. So again, I think there is a sea change coming, but it's not tomorrow. It will be over the course of the next few months or years, where we start to test drive and kick the tires a little bit to find the best use cases.
It sounds really exciting. I mean, it sounds like you get to understand and to see a whole bunch of new systems, a whole bunch of new technologies. How do you keep up? How do you make sure you're always on the cutting edge of knowing using the right tool or knowing what tool not to use?
Well, I mean, I think like any industry and like any profession, you always have to have one eye on what everybody else is doing. You've got to have another eye on what programmers and where the next great idea is coming. I think it also requires a certain level of apprehension and a keen insight into questioning everything. First, if we are advisors and we are being brought in on very important matters, again, whether it's internal or part of a larger investigation, we want to make sure that we're using the best technology for that particular instance. It doesn't mean that we always do the same. If I was doing the same thing I did 10 years ago, I wouldn't be here right now, because essentially technology is a continuous expansion of the building blocks that came before it. And we're now presented with not just a building block, but a huge leap forward. So I think it's just adding another tool into our toolbox. I think that it's going to create other technologies and other tools that will help build upon that. But again, it really boils down to understanding what it is that you're after in the first place, and then making sure that the technology is suited to get you to that finish line. But it's just a being
Love it.
constantly aware. And then there's the regulatory side to it as well, which is that allowed? Are we allowed to look at it in this way? Is there personal information or privacy issues that we need to control and be mindful of? So again, there's many levels, but it keeps us interested and it keeps me excited. So I like it.
I love that. So, our leaders who, what advice would you give to them when thinking about data? How would they, any advice that you would give based on your years of experience?
So I think one of the biggest hurdles I have as a consultant and an advisor is really uh, making sure or building that trust on the part of the client that technology is here to help, not to hurt. I think there is a natural inclination for most people that if they don't understand something or they're not familiar with a particular avenue or technology, that it's something you don't really want to mess with at that stage. You know, the fear of the unknown. I think that is the core of what I do as a consultant. It's to provide the pros and cons of various avenues of interrogation. But really, at the end of the day, it's about handing over the information necessary to make the tough decisions going forward when dealing with data. So my recommendation for corporate leaders and CEOs when sort of going down the road of potentially having to look at large volumes of
Yeah.
data, it's to not be too scared of the new. In particular, if there are an abundance of technologies out there that you've not experienced before. Um, the reality is that we're presented with an impossible task. We have too much information to get through, and ultimately you're going to have to rely on some level of technology to get you from A to B. And there's not always a clear path to that end goal. So really, it's about working with trusted partners, people who are in the industry that really have used these tools on various matters, and really can provide that level of comfort and that sort of pros and cons analysis to the corporate CEO, so they are comfortable in the decision that they make. But it's a tough one. I think that is probably the most difficult part of this job, is to really showcase the road forward and really try and hope that's the road we take when you're dealing with a driver who's never been there before. And really it's built out of trust, it's built out of experience and a collaborative approach to data.
And one of the big questions I know a lot of leaders are asking now is, can I use AI? Is it safe to use AI? What would you say to them?
I would say that if you're going to turn over all your systems to an AI tool tomorrow, I would probably say, ooh, hold on a little minute. You don't want to throw all your eggs in one basket. But at the same time, I think like I mentioned earlier, we're at a point right now where we can test these things out and really start to see where things bend or break or how they work and where the advantages lie. If the digital house is in its proper place, if information governance from the very
Mhm.
beginning of our conversation is providing solid information and strong data points, why not use that to your advantage? Why not utilize new technologies to see where advantages lie, and it can be found in some of the most mundane places. In terms of creating efficiencies within organizations, just on data points alone. How often do you open that door and release air conditioning?
Mm.
All of those little points that can be automated through an AI system can create benefits. Whether or not it's worth the investment, I mean, that's a very different analysis. But I do encourage everyone to start looking at their data as a tool to potential benefits, and really try and figure out ways to use the new technologies that are coming on board in creative ways that will help increase those benefits and advantages.
No, I have the feeling you are going to be inundated with people going, well, we're looking at rolling out this project and it's an AI, so it's a large language model or multimodal in some way. We just want to make sure that we're not breaking any compliance laws, no regulation, no issues from a GDPR perspective, and because there's so many opportunities, I'm sure that getting it right first time means that you got to just go out and do it, but you have to be very careful to make sure you're not breaking any laws in the process. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and in Europe in particular, where data protection is a core and fundamental right within organizations and individuals. Companies like mine, data processors are charged with not necessarily protecting that data, but raising flags when we're presented with information that might be going awry.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to inform data controllers that this is a potential issue, and we're held jointly and severally liable for those types of breaches. So everyone in the industry has to be very clear as to what can and cannot be done
Mm.
with data. Now, at the end of the day, it's for the lawyers to sort of tread across the advisory road of what is right and wrong for their corporate clients. But certainly, data investigators like myself work very closely with those lawyers to make sure that what their understanding is marries up with what we're doing, and having that client comfort that their data is being held true to itself, and that no one is doing anything that shouldn't be done with data outside of the sort of regulatory guardrails that are slowly coming into effect.
Goodness, Dan, look, I could talk to you for hours, and thank you so much for today. I'd love to have you back to talk about another couple of things, especially with data and AI. Is that something you'd be able to do?
Yeah, I am one of those very strange lawyers who loves to talk data. So data.
Oh, I
You want to
love it.
talk you want to talk data? I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. This has been CEO Reflects. Thank you.
Thank you.